Okay, as you see, I was on my Instagram for Rojo Chief Clothing, and I'm clicking on my online clothing store. And on here, I have clothes. I got hoodies, sweatshirts. If you like to buy them, long sleeve, short sleeve. I'm clicking on hoodies right now for men, and that's one. And then I'm clicking back just to show you fashions that I have for women. Like I have long sleeve shirt. Okay. Then I even have clothing for babies as well and kids. So that's the onesie. You can get that in different colors, as well as t-shirts, hoodies, and long sleeves for kids. So now let's get ready for the show. Okay, so let's see what they have to say. Now, it says here, who were the first Americans? However, despite widespread support for the idea of the earliest Americans are the ancestors of modern Native Americans, the ancestry of the first people to inhabit the Americas was long debated because the face and head features of the oldest known American skeletons do not look much like those of modern Native Americans. So they're saying that the oldest known American skeletons do not look like modern Native Americans. Now, when they say modern Native Americans, they're talking about people that look like they're Asian. It says modern Native Americans closely resemble people of China, Korea, and Japan. And we know how those people look. They have light complexion a lot of times. The hair is straight, and they have slanted eyes, right? It says, but the oldest skeletons do not. The earliest known American skeletons have longer, narrow skulls than modern Native Americans, smaller, shorter faces. All in all, the earliest Americans more closely resemble modern peoples of Africa, Australia, and the Southern Pacific Rim. Okay, so that's what he had to say when he said about the difference between the original people of the land, the oldest Americans that's here, look like people from Africa, Australia, and the Southern Pacific Rim. Now keep in mind what the anthropologist James Chatters had to say about the modern Native Americans, the people that migrated over from Asia over to America about 10 to 20,000 years ago, that they look like people from China, Korea, and Japan. But he said that the first Americans, the more ancient skeletons, their skulls look like people from Africa, Australia, and the South Pacific. Now, this person here, this image of an Indian, of an American Indian, looks a lot like the people that he described, as that their skulls look like African. Now, he could pass for African. He could pass for a person from Australia a little bit, but not much because his brow line doesn't stick out as much. But he does favor the people from the South Pacific. Now, let's look at his complexion. Okay? Now, look what they say underneath. They say sold at auction, carved, painted, wood cigar store, dwarf Virginian Indian. He was an Indian from Virginia. This is how they said the Indians look like, okay? This is the real depiction of Indians that was in Virginia, that was used as tobacco Indians for stores, at stores where the English and other Europeans were selling tobacco, and that the American Indians on the East Coast in Virginia, that they was growing a lot of tobacco, and they had a contract with England in order to grow it and sell it to them. Now look, this is an image of the real Chief Powhatan. Now, you see him? He looks just like the image of the tobacco Indian, of the Virginian tobacco Indian. And this is the image, this is the statue of how the real Chief Powhatan, an American Indian chief in Virginia, how he looked. Now, right here, as you see, it says, 2 days after, Powhatan, having disguised himself in the most fearfulest manner he could, caused Captain Smith to be brought forth to a great house in the woods, and there, upon a mat by the fire, to be left alone. Not long after, from behind a mat that divided the house, was made the most dolefulest noise he could ever heard. Then Powhatan, more like a devil than a man, with some 200 more as black as himself. You see how he described him? And then they said this was a reference in Jamestown in 1544 through 1699, John Smith. Now that's how John Smith had described Chief Powhatan. Now to me, that totally, the image of Chief Powhatan, of him being dark skinned and what we call today as black skinned person, that fits the description. That statue that I just showed you is what this man was describing. Now look at this image. This is the fake version. This is the whitewash version of Chief Powhatan. As you see here, he looks like a Eurasian Native American. The ones that came here about 10 to 30,000 years ago. The people that look like they came from China, Japan, and Korea. That's the features that he has. He doesn't look like the earliest Americans that they described as looking like African people. He doesn't look like an African. You can't mistake him for an African person. And you can't mistake him for an Australian or a person from South Pacific Rim. Now here's your original Muskogee Creek Indians. Okay, as you see, they have high cheekbones. They're dark skinned. They're not fair skinned people. And a lot of these people, they were in Alabama. They were also in parts of Georgia, I believe Tennessee, and Virginia as well. Okay, that's how they look. And these are the ancient artifacts of the Creek Indians. Now, if you look at this image, you see the shape of the nose, you see the lips protruding outward, and you see their features look similar to African people, and they also look a lot like the people from the South Pacific Rim as well, okay? These are the images that the Creek Indians' ancestors created thousands of years ago. And you see here, this is from 1913, and this is the people that they call modern Native Americans, Eurasian Native American people, that look like Chinese people, Japanese, and Korean people, according to James Chatters, right? And that they came here after the earliest Americans, okay? So, again, these people, these are the ones that they call Mongoloid because of their facial features look like Asian people, okay? Again, you can't mistake these people for folks that look like they came from Africa or Australia or the South Pacific because they look nothing alike, okay? So they use this image here of the Eurasian Native Americans in order to cover up the fact that the original Indians and the true Indians, the oldest Indians of this landmass, is folks that look like African people, is people that look like people from Australia and the South Pacific. Now this is the whitewash version of the Creek Indians. Now as you see that this is the modern Native Americans, as James Chatters called it, the folks that look like they came from Japan, Korea, and China, this is them. These are not the original Creek Indians. This is the whitewash version. Okay, so the Know Nothing. The Know Nothings were a nativist political party in the United States in the 1850s, officially known as the Native American Party before 1855. Okay, so these were European males that was born in the United States on American soil, and that's why they call themselves Native American, because if you're born on the American continent, you're considered as a Native American. Now these, and like I said before, the people whose lineages originally come from Europe was considering themselves as Native Americans first. Then they started to call the people that came from Eurasia Native Americans. Okay, now this is Nasir M. Nahe Ali. He is from the Chicago, Illinois area, and I used to work with him with his NGO, for his indigenous NGO that he had presented this information about the first Americans being Negroid. As we know, Negroid is nothing but a scientific terminology that they use to describe the earliest American Indians. And Negroid sounds a lot like the word Negro, right? So they're talking about black people, or so-called black people, which are the Paleo-Americans. The Paleo-Americans is just another terminology for Paleo-Indians, and Paleo means ancient. So ancient Indians, the first Americans, okay? So listen to what he says when he describes them.
Making sure that folks are comfortable.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you have works that you would like to share with us. Would you please do us the honor?
Oh, actually I do. A lot of the research and the reading that I do, whether it's for my classes or for another book that I'm writing, really even just my hobby enjoyment reading is really kind of focused around anthropology and archaeology. And there is a good book. I'm going to go over here and pull the title. It's a really good book about the Olmec civilization in the Central America region. And it's a book written by an author by the name of Amber Vanderwarker. And it's called Farming, Hunting, and Fishing in the Olmec World. It's really a good book. It's one of the best ones that I've seen. It came out in 2006. And in this book, she has one of the best, I guess you could say, concentration of various tidbits of information about these ancient Negroid peoples. For instance, she talks about the types of foods that they ate, the types of animals that they ate, the types of fruits and vegetables that they ate, how they organized their cities to accommodate rotation of crops around the outside of the village area, how they were actually able to cure seeds to last 100 years. That's the type of stuff that I'm interested in. You know, like how do you start a city from the village level, and how do you rotate your crops around the outside? How do you actually figure out what things you need to eat in what proportion, you know, based off of that? And it's a very, very good read. It's not too hard. She's got some good graphs and pictures in there, and she's not overbearing with the over-technical language. But I recommend that book strongly for those to supplement their African and African-American studies, to find a Negroid peoples here in the Americas, and to discover and really reclaim and begin to reuse that which is what our ancestors did.
Now, let me ask you this question really quickly, because there's someone in the chat room who's interested in children's books.
Yes.
So, are there any children's books that you can recommend?
They have a couple small books that are probably for, I would probably say, middle elementary school. But actually, I've had a couple of my students that took my class asked me to devise a children's book because, for the very same reason that you asked that question. There's a series of books about the mound builders, and some of these you can find at eBay. They're like $1 or $2 a piece. Really short, booklets, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 pages. One is called Houses of the Mound Builders. Second one is called The Holy Stones of Newark, Ohio.
Okay.
The third one is called Ancient Mound Builders in Michigan, which is actually a collection of 4 reports, and that one's about 68 pages total. And those are just some good ones. A junior high student shouldn't have any problem. One of our very brilliant, elementary school children shouldn't have any problem following along for that. It wouldn't be like a lullaby story or a young toddler story. It would be for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Okay, great. Now, about your books, you have actually 2 books, right?
I have one and another that will be out possibly at the beginning of next month.
Tell us a little bit about your current book.
The one that's already published is called The Paleo-American, a primer on ancient American history, and that one is, I call it a primer because it's more of a teaching tool. It's real concentrated. It is meant to bring forward about the last 150 years worth of research on these Negroid peoples in the Americas, and it follows the people as their name changes over time. A lot of people don't understand that. And I follow it no matter what the name is used to describe our people. I show you where there is a consistent description as a thread that follows through all the name changes, and that's really what you have to follow. It's just a cranial measurement. You can follow it and trace it all the way through. And the book helps you really get a firm understanding if that's something that you want to pursue and research on your own. It provides some excellent source material and some perspectives on that. The second one I'm working on is going to address more of the civics behind slavery being dead, and why if you wanted to move as a Paleo-American right now, commercially and in interacting with government, then the second book will help you understand how to have that conversation with people.
Right. Okay. That sounds very...
Now, as you heard before, that the Negroid American Indians were the first American Indians, the first people of America, whereas the people that are called Native American today are called Eurasian because that's where they came from. They came from Eurasia. And they looked like people from China, Japan, and Korea. Whereas the earliest and oldest inhabitants of America looked Negroid, like African people, like people from South Pacific and Australia. So as you see that the United States had used the Johnny-come-lately Eurasian Native Americans in order to hide and conceal the truth about how the original and the oldest American Indians look like. And that's the reason why Native Americans do not like to be called American Indian.